Hello, everyone. My name is Gurja Basra, and I'm the Manager of Patient Programs, Research and Advocacy at Lymphoma Canada. I hope you all enjoyed the panel discussion, and now I'm pleased to welcome you all to the second session of the day titled Supporting the Emotional Wellbeing of Caregivers. So just a reminder that this Zoom software does not allow you to access video features or turn on your microphone. At the end of the presentation, we'll try and take a few questions should time permit. So to introduce our speaker, joining us today is Dr. Rinat Nissim, who is a staff psychologist and the co-director of the Caregiver Clinic at the Princess Margaret Cancer Center, University Health Network, and an assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Toronto. As a clinician researcher, her research program is aligned with her clinical focus on the psychosocial needs of family caregivers of individuals with a cancer diagnosis. Her research has been funded by both the Canadian Cancer Society and the Canadian Institutes of Health Research. So thank you for joining us today, and you can get started as soon as you're ready.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for attending. I'm going to talk to you today about the emotional needs of family caregivers. And this is because of two reasons. One is that caregivers are the invisible backbone of cancer care. Family caregivers make significant contribution to the overall care of cancer patients. And the reliance on caregivers, our partners in care, is actually increasing over time because of more and more cancer treatment provided on outpatient basis, and also because more and more people, thankfully, are living longer with cancer. And the second reason I'm going to talk to you about the emotional experience and needs of caregivers is because for us in psychosocial oncology, caregivers are patients in their own right. Cancer is not just a physical trauma, it's also a psychological trauma. And in that respect, the trauma is shared. It's not limited to the person with the physical trauma. And all the research out there that also looked at the distress of family caregivers, the emotional distress of family caregivers, so measuring depression or anxiety, reported that family caregivers have the same level of distress or even higher level of distress than the patients they are caring for. We've done at Princess Margaret one of the first studies in this regard. We gave patients, individuals with a cancer diagnosis treated at Princess Margaret, questionnaires about their emotional distress. We then gave their spouses the exact same questionnaires, and the spouses had double the distress than the patients. And we know that this is true. Doesn't matter what kind of measure of emotional distress you give the patients and caregivers. I want to focus on one type of distress, which is fear of cancer recurrence. Fear of cancer recurrence is a common concern of individuals with a cancer diagnosis. And when you look at concerns of individuals who completed cancer treatment, you find often that fear of cancer recurrence is the top concern. Sometimes it's fatigue and then fear of cancer recurrence. Sometimes it's fear of cancer recurrence and then fatigue. But fear of cancer recurrence is always one of the top two. And what's interesting is that if you also look at the distress and the fear of cancer recurrence of the family caregivers of individuals who completed cancer treatment, you find again that they have equal or even greater levels of fear of cancer recurrence than the patient. And why is that? So there are many different reasons why the emotional distress of family caregivers is the same and often greater than the distress of patients. And I'm not, there are many layers of why this is true, but I think one common reason is that caregivers tend to dismiss their own distress or their own emotional needs or practical needs, or they tend to feel guilty about having this distress or having those needs. So, you know, a lot of times I hear it doesn't make sense that I feel this way. I'm not the patient. I shouldn't feel this way. I'm not the patient. I'm being selfish for feeling this way because I'm not the patient. And we know that this inner bully, this critical voice, escalates distress and depletes resources. So if we keep telling ourselves, I shouldn't feel this way, we're actually going to feel this way even more and for longer. Another common reason related to this is that we know that family caregivers tend to engage with what we call self-silencing or protective buffering. So caregivers tend to hide their concerns or distress from the patient and other family members often. And this is to protect, right? You don't want to burden others with your own emotional distress. And we actually know that paradoxically, this tendency actually increases distress because the people that you tend to lean on cannot be there for you because you're not sharing the distress. And also it takes a lot of energy to hide distress, energy that you can use in a different way. So what I thought I will do is speak about some common distressing emotions and give you some suggestions on how to deal with them. Common distressing emotions are fear and uncertainty, grief and anticipatory grief, anger, resentment, guilt, and I think the most common experience for caregivers is the sense of helplessness. So fear and uncertainty. Cancer brings uncertainty, regardless of the prognosis. Cancer always brings uncertainty. Sometimes uncertainty is greater. So, for example, a lot of times people talk about anxiety. So before scans, before appointments with the doctor, there is more uncertainty. Sometimes there is more uncertainty when new physical symptoms appear. But uncertainty is always there. It may not always be so much at the forefront, but it's always there, always in the background and sometimes more in the forefront. And what we know is that as human beings, we are hardwired to dislike the uncertainty. There is a really interesting study that I think shows that very well, where they gave one group of participants was told that they are definitely going to get an electric shock. And another group of participants was told that they may or may not get the electric shock. And the group that was told that they are definitely going to get the electric shock was actually less distressed. So that really shows us, I think, how much we dislike uncertainty. Sometimes we rather know that the bad outcome is coming than live in a state of uncertainty. That's how much we dislike uncertainty. And what's important to understand is that uncertainty by default brings both hope and fear. And you kind of have to learn to live with this duality of hope and fear. Always hold both hope and fear, which is very, very difficult. And often, in order to manage this difficulty, what happens is that one person holds all the fear while the other holds all the hope. It's like a seesaw. And a lot of times what I see is that actually it's the family caregiver, often the spouse, that is kind of holding all the fear, and the patient can kind of live with hope. It's not true, obviously. There is always, you're both carrying this duality, but it's almost like, one is experiencing more side of it than the other. And what I would like to suggest is that it's really important to understand the duality, that you're always going to feel hope and you're always going to feel fear at the same time. So, because what I see is that sometimes people, if they feel hope, they question themselves. They're saying, I'm really optimistic, I'm really hopeful. Does that mean I'm in denial? No, it just means that hope is more at the forefront right now. Or sometimes people feel like, I keep thinking about, worst case scenario. Does that mean that I'm giving up? No, you also feel hope. It's just that fear is more at the forefront right now. And it's very difficult to hold both hope and fear. Sometimes it feels so intense. Sometimes it feels like you feel it at the same time, or sometimes it's like it just keeps shifting very quickly. But that's normal. That's what happens when we deal with uncertainty. We have to learn to hold the duality of hope and fear. And it's important to understand that it's going to keep shifting, because both hope and fear are always going to act like waves. All emotions are waves. They always come and go. So if you feel fear, know at least that, there's going to be other times. There are going to be times when going to feel more hope. It's always going to change. So and we need to keep holding it. We need to keep giving space for both hope and fear. And we also can help ourselves by planning and preparing both for hope, both for the best case scenario, and at the same time for the worst case scenario. In a way, when you have a plan A for best case scenario and a plan B for worst case scenario, or a plan C also and a plan D for all kinds of scenarios in between, you're kind of giving your mind some relief from the uncertainty. You're giving your mind a sense that I'm prepared. I have more certainty. I have more control. I know what I'm going to do if different things are going to happen. And in many ways, if you allow yourself to have a plan B, to plan for the worst, a lot of times, although it's difficult to engage in that, a lot of times it will actually bring relief, and it will help you even more than before to just live in hope, because you've done your preparation, you as much as you can, and you can now put it aside and really be in the moment and focus on best case scenario. Another very common emotion is grief. A lot of times people think that grief is an experience that starts after someone dies. We think about grief as an experience that starts with a cancer diagnosis. Sometimes we call it anticipatory grief, because the diagnosis means that you're starting to anticipate or contemplate a loss that you didn't think about before. And you start naturally grieving for that loss that you anticipate may happen. But I don't think it's just anticipatory grief, because a cancer diagnosis brings with it many losses. Some of them are tangible, so changes in income, abilities, independence, routine. Some of them are intangible. Even certainty, the illusion of certainty that we all need and crave and take for granted, all of a sudden you don't have that anymore. You live with uncertainty now. That's a loss. The vision, whether you had an implicit vision or explicit vision that you had for the future, it's now, not a guarantee. It may need to be changed. That's another loss. So there are a lot of losses that you need to grieve. And that's a very, very common experience. Again, like all emotions, grief too, it comes in waves. It's going to come and go. Sometimes it's going to feel very, very intense. Sometimes it's going to feel like this wave is a tsunami. Sometimes it's going to feel like this wave is never going to end, but it will. All emotions are like waves. What's interesting about grief is also that because it's such a difficult experience, I think grief is really hard. It really makes us realize how little control we have, how little certainty we have. It's really difficult for us to feel that. Because it's so difficult for us to feel that, sometimes we feel emotions that are easier for us to feel, that almost makes us restore the illusion of control. So guilt, it's kind of restoring the illusion of control if you think about it, because it's, if I've done something differently, maybe I could have avoided this, maybe I could have prevented this. Anger, same thing. If they would have done something differently, maybe this could have been avoided. Again, an illusion of control. These are easier emotions for us to feel. I would encourage you, if you feel those emotions, guilt, anger, regret, resentment, to think about them as maybe there are signs that there is grief underneath. Maybe I'm kind of going through a wave of grief right now, and this is what I need to kind of attend to and recognize. And those guilt, the other emotions are just kind of masking it. And another thing that is really interesting about grief is that when we grieve, we always grieve for all of our losses all over again, all at once. So often when you grieve, even it doesn't matter if it's anticipatory grief or not, it reactivates grief that you experienced over previous losses. It's important to recognize that it's normal. It may make the waves a bit stronger, but again, it's a wave. It's going to come and go. And I think, it's really important, especially when we talk about a wave of grief, but it's also true when we talk about a wave of fear. You need to learn to ride those waves. And you each know what helps you. It can be all kinds of things that can be soothing for you and helpful for you. Reaching out to others. Sometimes people actually prefer to be alone. Anything that you need to do, but the first step is, recognize I'm going through a wave right now. How do I take care of myself as I'm going through this wave? And then move on after it passes. And I also want to talk lastly about helplessness. If you think about this, paradoxically, as a caregiver, you have less control than the patient. The patient is the one that really knows how it feels in their bodies. And a lot of times family caregivers tell me how, is the patient telling me everything? Like they're always trying to guess what's going on. The patient is also the one who controls information. They control what they're going to ask the doctor, when they're going to speak with the doctor. And sometimes as a caregiver, you may have your own questions, and it's a lot harder for you to get this information or to get the reassurance that you need. So in many ways, caregivers have less control than the patient. But I think a more deeper aspect of the helplessness that all caregivers feel, it's almost like an inherent part of being a caregiver, is that the patient, the person you care about, is experiencing an issue that you cannot fix for them. It's so hard to watch someone you love and care for going through something so difficult and you cannot fix it. You cannot take it away. And that's a really difficult experience. I can't tell you how many times I spoke with people who were in circumstances when there were patients and caregivers. And all the time I hear that it's so much harder, so much more helplessness to be the caregiver than to be the patient. And I think when we deal with helplessness, sometimes what helps is to kind of remind ourselves that we're actually usually doing better than we think. We're actually usually more helpful than we think. Usually things are progressing, even if we don't think they're progressing. Usually we accomplish more every day than we think. And a lot of it is because our mind is not so good at understanding progress. So I'm referring here to what is called the planning fallacy. A lot of times when we think about progress, how it should look like, or we think about, this is what I planned and this is how it should look like, we always think about it in a linear way. But progress or accomplishments, they never look like that. They look, you're gonna move, there are like 2 steps forward and 3 steps backwards. Like it's never gonna look like a linear line. So it's really, really important to understand that and not expect progress or all the things you wanted to accomplish, or all the things you're trying to help with to go exactly the way you planned them to go. And the other thing is that to remember is that our brains, our minds are not designed to make us happy. Our brains are designed to keep us safe. And that's why we are hardwired. We are, our minds are Velcro for the bad and Teflon for the good. So a lot of times when we think about, like for example, I'm not being very helpful, it's because of that. It's because we are Teflon for the bad. So we will tend that all the places where all the experiences where we feel like we failed and we could have done better, these are the ones that stick. But they are never the whole picture. This is just a bias that we all have. So we gotta kind of train our minds to also see the good, also see what we accomplished every day, how we were helpful every day, how we and the patients are progressing and moving forward every day, how every day we can come up with goals that we can actually achieve. So it takes a lot of work and a lot of training, but like every muscle, doesn't matter if it's physical or mental, if we're training, if we are at it every day, we can make it happen. I want to conclude with also just saying that I was covering a lot of the negative emotions that come with being a caregiver. And of course, there are always going to be waves of that. But I want to end with something positive. When you're going through a cancer experience, doesn't matter as a patient or as a caregiver, this is also when you discover how resilient you are. I think we all underestimate how resilient we are as human beings. And there is a lot of growth that come with that. We learn how precious things are. We learn to have better priorities. We learn that whatever comes our way, we can handle it. because, you know, I think part of the experience of being a caregiver is you really showing yourself, wow, I'm doing this really hard things and I can handle it. I didn't choose it, but I can handle it. And there is a lot of growth and a lot of beautiful things that come with that. I also want to say that you are not alone. A big part of being a caregiver is that it's a very, very isolating experience. A lot of times, you know, your friends may not yet be caregivers. They don't understand. So you lose your circle of friends, or sometimes you don't want to share with friends. You want to do other things with friends. You want to use them more as a distraction. So there are a lot of resources out there to support caregivers, and it's really, really important that you know about them and you reach out to them and you create a community for yourself as you're going through this experience as a caregiver. In this slide, if you just Google Caregiver Clinic, Princess Margaret Hospital, or Caregiver Clinic, UHN, University Health Network, you will find a link to the webpage of the Caregiver Clinic that I'm directing. And if you go to the tab that says resources, you will see many different resources. I really want to highlight the support that is offered by organizations like Wellspring. I hope many of you know about Wellspring. Wellspring is a community organization that provides support free of charge to anyone impacted by cancer. And they provide one-on-one peer support, they provide support groups, they provide many different workshops and courses that you can attend on your own as a caregiver or together with the patient. So I really want to invite all of you to look at the resources tab under our Caregiver Clinic webpage. If you are a patient of the Princess Margaret Hospital, you can also go to the About tab and see how you can be connected with our clinic for more personalized support. So I'm going to conclude here. I want to thank you for attending and listening, and I believe we have some time for questions.
Thank you, Dr. Nassim, for that presentation, and particularly on the reminder that emotions come in waves and that we're often doing better than we think. And on the mention of resources, thank you for bringing up Wellsprings. Lymphoma Canada also works alongside Wellspring to offer a monthly support group for patients. And we also have a peer-to-peer mentorship program where we connect patients and caregivers with other patients or caregivers who are further along in the journey, because it can be helpful to speak with others who have gone through what you're currently going through. And for more information on that, or to be matched with a caregiver mentor, you can visit our website at www.lymphoma.ca. And with that said, as a reminder to the audience, please, you can submit your questions in the chat box, which you can find in the middle of the black toolbar, which is at the bottom of your screen. We have had a few questions come in. So starting off, what advice would you give to caregivers who struggle with balancing honesty and optimism when talking with their loved one who has the illness?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would actually recommend using the framework of what we call double awareness of the duality of hope and fear. It's more like an invitation to do both. Can we plan for best case scenario, and at the same time, can we plan for worst case scenario together? In many ways, it's like, you know, riding a wheel. It's something that we never want to do, we never want to engage in, but once we do, there is a sense of relief. I want to just highlight sometimes the willingness to engage in planning for the best, but also planning for the worst. It's not that, you know, sometimes one partner, The patient may be more willing to do it than the caregiver want, or vice versa. So you kind of need to wait until you're both willing to do it at the same time. I also want to highlight that a lot of times from my experience for patients, when patients are going through treatment, this is often not the time to engage in planning for best and for worst case scenario, because the patient, when they're going through treatment, they really need to focus physically and mentally on getting through the treatment. So it's really at times when there is a bit of a break and stability, that's when it's good to engage in those plans.
Okay. And another question came in saying that as the holidays approach, or even this past weekend with Thanksgiving get-togethers, I often feel torn between wanting my loved one to be a part of gatherings and worrying about their safety in regards to infections and fatigue. How can caregivers manage that balance without feeling guilty either way?
Yeah, that's really such a good point. I would like to suggest, don't be tricked by your guilt. Your guilt is really an expression of love. It's about how much you want to do, and it's not like you don't have to believe it. It's just not ideal. You want to create something ideal and you can't. Again, you don't have the control that you would like to have. So it's really about accepting it and really remembering what I said. Our mind is Velcro for the bad, Teflon for the good. So bring in the good. Think about all the good things, all the good experiences you created as you're going through a holiday or other important event. Okay, you really need to train your mind to see it, because your mind by default is going to focus on the bad.
Absolutely. And I think that was a great question, especially as we head into these next few months. And we also have another question saying that as a caregiver, I often second guess decisions, from treatment questions to daily care choices. How can we build confidence in our role without getting overwhelmed by fear or doubt?
Yeah, really good question. I think I'm sorry to repeat this, but I think it's going to this illusion of control. You gotta remember, when you make a decision, you're making the best decision you can at that time with the information and the abilities you had at that time. Every single moment, you're doing the very best you can. And I'm saying how it relates to the illusion of control because we tend to overestimate the impact of our decisions. You're going to make a decision, but the outcome is not directly linked to your decision. The outcome is always a combination of many different variables. One of them was your decision. So you got to accept that. You're going to make the best decision you can make. You still cannot control the outcome. And you're going to make the best decision and hope you're going to get the best outcome. You may or may not. And if you don't, then you're going to make new decisions. And again, the outcome is not going to be determined by that, just by your decision, by very many other variables. I hope this is helpful because, you know, a lot of times I think that questioning a decision is about the illusion of control, about really thinking that if I'd made a different decision, I could have changed the outcome. Maybe it wouldn't have been the exact same outcome, but it doesn't mean that you know what would have been the outcome if you had the chance to go back and change your decision.
Thank you, Dr. Nassim. I think there's lots to take away there. And with that said, I do want to direct the audience to attend the next session on nutrition for lymphoma patients. We do have a 5-minute break in between. So just as a reminder, as I mentioned yesterday, it can be difficult to stay seated for a while. So I recommend taking a standing break, and I look forward to seeing you in the next session. Thank you, Dr. Nassim.